for ourselves, beliefs that empower us instead of disempower us. I remember a belief system that was offered to me years ago. I think Robert Schuller is one of the people that popularized it, and it started many years before that. And that belief system was this. Somebody once asked me, Tony, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And I thought, God, if I knew I couldn't fail, I'd do almost anything. And so I offer you the same thing. What would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail? And if you're saying almost anything, then just go do it. Because if you set up the right rules, it'll be almost impossible to fail. It's impossible for me to fail because the only way I could fail would be to give up. And there's no chance of me doing that. I got too much pleasure in going for it 100% in life. Remember the analogy from earlier in this tape program. If you try something and it doesn't work, you ran a play. You're still in the football game. As long as you're on the field and the clock is still ticking, then the bottom line is you haven't failed. And if your heart's moving, that's the clock. It's still ticking. You're in great shape. So just go for it. Try something else, change your approach, and eventually you'll achieve what you want. But make sure it's hard to fail, easy to succeed. Make sure you're in control, not your environment, not what other people think. Otherwise, you'll always be in a reaction in life and never be in control. Now, what can we do to really free ourselves from this? What can we do? You say, okay, I got these great definitions, Tony. It makes sense. But, it's one thing intellectually to have new definitions. It's another thing to have this gut-level feeling here that drives me nuts. How do I get rid of it? Well, number one step, like in any other change that you want to make, is just decide. Decide you are going to be free of this fear. Does that mean it never comes up? No. It just means if it comes up, you're a human being, you take a look at it, you realize it's false evidence that appears real, and you move on. You change your state, you change your physiology, and you go for it anyway. You ask yourself a better question like we talked about earlier. Or you create a positive anchor. There's so many things you can do. But first, right now, you got to decide that these two killers of human success, fears of failure and fear of success, are no longer going to stop you. I'll give you a classic example. A couple years back when I was doing work initially, I was just establishing myself in the media in terms of my work with athletes and with business people. Life magazine did an article on me. And in covering me, I told them about some of the work I'd done with the Army. And, to say the least, they were a little bit conservative and a little bit skeptical might be a better description. And I said, okay, if you're so great and you can do all these great results, let us pick an athlete and let's see you do some work with him. So I said, great. They happened to be at my house that day while we're talking, and the television was on, and the Los Angeles Lakers were playing. Well, Byron Scott at the time was not doing too terribly well. In fact, I think he scored 3 points that game, and Chick Hearn was a little bit on his case. Bottom line is, they said, let's see you work with this guy. I said, great, you set him up. Sure enough, they did. The next day, I find myself in Los Angeles in a gymnasium with Byron Scott. Here we are, and what's the problem? Well, I started talking to Byron, and he said, the problem with his game is this. I found out when people threw him the ball, one thought was rushing through his head. Pass it. Why? Because in his mind, he had stored so many failures, so many times where he had screwed up, made some dumb mistakes, that now whenever the ball came to him, his immediate association was failure. The only way to keep from failing was give it to somebody else. Can you imagine trying to make a shot when most of your nervous system is associating a past failure? There's no way you're going to succeed. See, remember that phrase or belief we talked about earlier? I want to reinforce it again. If you want to succeed in your life, remember this phrase. The past does not equal the future. Because you failed yesterday, or all day today, or a moment ago, or for the last 6 months, or for the last 16 years, the last 50 years of life doesn't mean anything. All that matters is what are you going to do right now? Otherwise, you carry all that luggage, all that load of negative emotion with you, and it'll affect your present performance. Now, it's one thing again to say that. How do you change them? One, you've got to decide, just as we said earlier. You've got to then get enough leverage that you're going to follow through. I got started talking to him, and I wanted to get a Dickens on him, if you will. I said, look, if you don't change this, what's it going to cost you? He said, well, I don't know. It's already costing me. I'm screwing up. I said, if you keep at this rate, what's going to happen? He said, I'm going to end up on the bench. And I got him to actually have some feelings about that. Why? I want him to link pain to not changing this pattern. As soon as his brain links pain, what's it going to do? Anything to avoid this. And it's going to use all of his resources. Does that make sense? Now, on the other side, I said, if we could really turn this thing around, what would happen? He said, well, God, I'm a great shooter. He said, I'd be swishing him. He said, I could be one of the best shooters in the league. I really know I could be there. I could compete with the best. I've got an incredible shot. So, sure enough, we had plenty of pleasure linked to making the change, pain and not. What's step 3? Step 3 is what I want you to do with your ideas of failure from the past. It's a simple way of changing your neuroassociation so you don't have any negative feelings linked anymore. How do you do it? Real simple. I took Byron Scott and I said, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand up nice and tall. I want you to breathe fully, and I want you to stand and breathe the way you do when you feel absolutely unstoppable. And so what I basically did was got him to feel really good. I got him to change his what? His state. How? By changing the way he was breathing and his moving, by changing his physiology. Remember when we talked about the ways to change state? I also got him to focus on times when he'd really been successful. So what's happening now? He's standing tall, he's breathing strong, he's feeling energetic. I got him making gestures like he's really in charge. I got him shouting a word. The word was boom. A particular sound where he felt really strong when he made this particular sound. Sure enough, I got him to focus on his success. Now he feels absolutely incredible. While he's feeling incredible, I anchor him a few times. And while he's feeling incredible, I said the word boom. He's feeling great, I say boom. He's feeling great, I say boom. So pretty soon I say boom in a weird way, and sure enough, his shoulders come back and began to feel good, just like Ivan Pavlov on the dogs with the bell. Same thing, just like what advertisers have done for you for years, only I'm helping him to find a trigger to get himself in a strong state. So I got him in a great place, and now I want to use what I call my erasure technique. So I said, listen, this is what I want you to do, Byron. I want you, while you're still feeling good, without having any major negative feelings, I want you to just watch the memory of some of your biggest mistakes. And when I say watch it, I said, just if you would, pretend it's a movie in your mind and just see the situation happen again, but don't get any negative feeling. Just watch it like an outsider, so it's like way over there. So he watched it, and I said, you tell me when you come to the end, and you run several of those movies. So he did. For about 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3, he continued to go, and he got his eyes closed, and finally goes, okay, nods his head. I said, okay, now what I want you to do is start at the end of those memories. And this is all I want you to do. I want you to run those memories as if they're movies, backwards, at triple the speed. In other words, I want you to see everything happening in reverse. The ball you threw away comes sucking right back up in your hands, and everything goes perfectly. Anything that was said and noises you heard, everything's happening in reverse. And while you're seeing all these things happening in reverse, I want you to simultaneously hear some humorous sounds, like a Nickelodeon, or like a circus, or something that would make you smile, and I want you to see the whole image in your favorite color. Now what am I doing here? I'm interrupting the pattern. You remember step number 1 was get leverage? I got leverage with him, didn't I? I got him to think about how painful it's going to be if he doesn't change, how much pleasure he's going to get if he does. Number 2, I'm now going to interrupt his pattern. These memories he keeps bringing up as a way to make himself feel lousy, and then his failure becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've got to break that pattern. I have him run it backwards at hyper speed. And while he's running it backwards, I say, see, imagine that Mickey Mouse ears are growing out of the other players as you're doing this. Imagine their noses are getting longer. Imagine you take the ball now and you slam dunk it. Now I have him do this over and over again, where each time he plays the memory, he does it faster and faster, he creates humorous music,